Hello, 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 and welcome back to Spin Cycle Live. I'm your host, Nathan Hale. Today, we have a lot to talk about. Blood test budgets and big promises. That is tonight's focus. Before we get started, let me know how you all are doing. You doing good out there in internet land? I hope you are. Today has been a good day, at least for me. I hope you had a great weekend, are looking forward to getting right back in the swing of things. I personally am almost done with the school year. I have a couple more things to do, but I'm looking forward to being done. Allows me to give more time to you all to give you even better news coverage. More things coming soon on all of that. But I guess we should get right into it with our first story of the week. Now, it's not often that I feel like I pull up little filler stories. This is definitely a little bit of a filler story, but I find it so fascinating that I had to bring it up. So let's talk about it. So Elizabeth Holmes is back in the news again today because of her new husband, apparently. So if you don't know, Elizabeth Holmes started this company called Theranos several years ago, and Theranos' whole mission was they were going to make this box that was, about the size of a large speaker that you'd put like a single drop of blood into it, and it would give you all of these amazing test results for it. And tell you, it would test like 120 different diseases and everything, see if you had anything. And then that was the goal of this box, was use a single drop of blood to do all these different blood tests all at once with the same piece of blood, right? Well, she raised a really exorbitant amount of money, and turns out all of this was an absolute fraud. There was no way she was ever going to be able to deliver on this. She was violating laws. She was defrauding investors. And all of this got taken down by a couple of really brave whistleblowers. So she's been in prison for all of that. And the story is fascinating because she is a very smart woman. This is a Stanford educated, I believe she's Stanford educated biomedical engineer, very intelligent person, smart enough to defraud billionaires out there. I don't know how many people could do that. And apparently her husband now is getting into the blood testing game. So this comes from the New York Post. Theranos felon Elizabeth Holmes advising baby daddy on new blood testing startup from behind bars. Disgraced Theranos founder Elizabeth Holmes is throwing her support behind a new medical startup, despite currently serving a federal prison term stemming from her previous biotech venture, according to a report. Holmes, who's 41, is locked up at a federal prison in Bryan, Texas, after being convicted in 2022 and sentenced to more than 11 years for defrauding investors in her now infamous blood testing startup, Theranos. So this is her with her baby daddy. She's not a particularly pretty woman, which kind of amazes me how she was able to defraud so many people. Clearly it wasn't because of her looks. Her current partner, Billy Evans, with whom she has 2 children, has now raised millions of dollars for a new startup that sounds eerily similar to what Theranos was involved in. And he's been getting advice from her as it gears up to launch, 2 anonymous sources close to the matter told NPR. The company, called Hemanthus, Greek for blood flower, focuses on medical testing, utilizing technology, and enables AI sensors to perform medical tests using beams of light, according to the outlet and a January patent the company secured. Ooh, got patents. Its patent says the tech can be used to test biological material, including sweat, saliva, urine, and purports to be able to perform diagnostic tests using small amounts of blood. Hemanthus' core technology, known as Raman spectroscopy, has been shown to be capable of diagnosing conditions like ALS and certain forms of cancer, the outlet writes. It has also been used to find improvised explosive devices on war battlefields. It's pretty cool. So, a couple of things. I think a lot of people you're here talking about this will very much characterize this as, oh, this is another fraud. This is another way to defraud people, which I think it's too early to say that, really, when it comes down to it. I'm taking a little bit of a more, maybe not necessarily grounded approach, but I don't know how to describe it. Let me explain my thought process. So, like I said, I believe Elizabeth Holmes is a really smart individual. I think she's a very intelligent person. People around her have said that she's extremely intelligent. I just think that she bit off a little more than she could chew when it came to Theranos. I've always said when it comes to her whole situation, had she tried to make a blood testing device that could test for even one disease off a single drop of blood on a countertop device, that would have been a breakthrough in the medical industry, right? Let alone 100. So she started smaller and done maybe one or two tests and slowly built up a product more and more and more, done more product development, she probably could have achieved the results that she wanted. But because she was trying to go from 0 to 60, she was trying to go from walking on the earth to shooting off into space on a rocket ship. She was able to do it, right? But had she tried to go from walking to running, she probably could have and slowly built a better product. Now, I think that any biomedical technology is able to do these types of testing easy, quickly, reliably, and fast. That's a breakthrough in medicine, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, to have a piece of technology that you can easily go, not only order your own blood test, but it only costs a single drop of blood or just maybe a finger prick, or, some other matter, like sweat, for example. I think that's a breakthrough in medical technology. So if they're able to pull something off where they can test for, they said ALS and a couple types of cancer, if they could test for 3 things based off of all that would be a breakthrough. And then you go to 5, and then 10, and then 20, and then 50, right? You slowly build up. So I think it'll be interesting to see. I'll definitely be keeping an eye on all of this for you all and keep you updated. But the theme of this episode is definitely around healthcare, because we have several other kind of healthcare stories to talk about. And this, I felt like, fit right into all that. So Elizabeth Holmes is certainly a fraud. She's convicted of defrauding investors. I want to talk about another fraud now, and that is Gavin Newsom. So Gavin Newsom moves to clear California's homeless encampments. Is the president of China coming to California again? Because that's what happened last time. So this comes from Newsweek. California Governor Gavin Newsom has drawn up a template local ordinance for the state's local governments to help them clear and ban the homeless encampments that have popped up in recent years. Newsom cannot force the adoption of his ordinance, but he can use the carrot of billions of dollars in state funding for housing issues to encourage cities to take it on. He vowed to crack down on encampments last year. The ordinance includes bans on persistent camping in one location and those that block free passage of sidewalks, but also requires local officials to give notice and, quote, make every reasonable effort to identify and offer shelter before clearing an encampment. The governor's office tied the ordinance to the release of $3.3 billion of previously announced Position 1 funding to help house and treat homeless people who are seriously ill, including those with mental health problems. Now, we all know why Gavin Newsom is doing this, don't we? It's no surprise, is it? He's doing this because he's trying to run for president in 2028, right? First off. Secondly, there's going to be, I believe he's term limited in 2026. So he's not going to be governor anymore. There's going to be an election in 2026 for the California gubernatorial election, right? He's trying to put the state into a good position so they don't get totally killed in those 2 elections, right? If he has the whole homelessness problem hanging over his head when he's trying to run for president, he's going to get killed. Because all the GOP is going to say is that, hey, Gavin, you caused this huge, massive homeless problem. Look at the homeless issue in California. Look how bad it is. You seriously think that you can be a good executive if this is what your home state looks like that you ran for 8 years? Wow. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. And I'm excited to see what happens. I think that this is a total sham, though, on Newsom's part. I mean, the man has been in office for several years now and has done nothing about the issue. And when when world dignitaries show up, like the president of China, all of a sudden, San Francisco is cleaned up, right? That's what happened when President Xi Jinping showed up in San Francisco. Is suddenly all the homeless were gone, right? The streets were clean. And then the day he leaves San Francisco, all of a sudden, all the homeless come right back in. So I'll give credit where credit is due, though, right? If we're trying to handle a homeless issue, better late than never, because it's not helping anyone, right? Especially the people who are homeless. But I think it's a little late to be stepping in, and I can totally see how this is going to be used as leverage in future elections for him. He's going to say, hey, look, I cleaned up the homeless issue. I cleaned up the homeless issue that I caused, but I cleaned it up nonetheless. Look at how good the state's doing now, right? So I don't think that's going to be enough to win him the presidency in 2028. I don't. He's going to have to do a whole lot more than that. But it's interesting to see how slowly he's making his way out of the cave and starting to position himself as he's this moderate Democrat, guys. He's handling the homeless issue. He's doing podcasts with Republicans on it, right? He did the whole podcast where Charlie Kirk came on. They debated for an hour, and Charlie Kirk totally mopped the floor with him. So don't get fooled by this man. All right. Let's move on. Let's talk about Trump for a little bit. All right. So, American hostage Edan Alexander released by Hamas after more than 580 days in captivity. This is a Fox News article. Hamas released the last living American hostage Monday after he spent more than 180 days in captivity inside the Gaza Strip. By the way, 180 days, that is when the war in Gaza began in 2023. Right, he's been a hostage since all of this started between Israel and Hamas. Edan Alexander, a 21-year-old dual U.S.-Israeli citizen, was received by a special Israeli Defense Force unit and was brought to an initial reception facility in Ramin, where he will undergo preliminary medical and psychological evaluations by IDF Medical Corps personnel, an Israeli official told Fox News. So this is great. This is great. I'm glad to see that we're getting people out of Israel, that we are keeping our American citizens safe. I believe that President Trump posted somewhere that America will move heaven and earth to make sure that our citizens are brought back home and protected. This is fantastic. The president has been in office for around 100 days now, right? And we have our last living hostage brought back. This is fantastic. Do you feel safer? Do you feel safer living under President Trump or President Biden? That's what I'd like to know. I feel a whole lot safer living under President Donald Trump than I do under Joe Biden ever, right? This started under Joe Biden, right? My president ends wars. My president brings hostages back home to America. Joe Biden starts wars. He keeps hostages in other countries, right? 580 days. He keeps hostages in space, right? He kept those astronauts up there. It only took Elon like a few weeks to send a little spaceship where they get the astronauts off the space station. We covered it on the show a few weeks ago, right? Those astronauts were up in space for like, how long were they up in space for? Like months, stranded up there. And like Trump comes in and immediately comes and gets them back, right? Biden just left them up there. This gentleman was being held hostage for 580 days. 580 days since 2023, since October 2023. Over a year, almost 2 years, this guy was being held hostage. And it takes Donald Trump like 100 days to bring him back, right? 2 years Joe Biden was in office while this guy was being held hostage. And he couldn't bring him back. But Donald Trump gets it done in under 100 days. Shameful to the Democrats. Do not forget this in 2026. Believe me. They will try and cover it up. But just remember, Donald Trump ends wars and brings back hostages. The Democrats don't. All right. Now this is interesting. House GOP unveils Medicare work requirements in Trump's big, beautiful bill. The bill includes north of $900 billion in spending cuts. Music to my ears. Say it isn't so. Music to my ears. $900 billion. Now we're talking about spending cuts here. This is fantastic. $900 billion. That's a lot of money, right? That's almost $1 trillion. That's a lot of money being cut. All right, let's hear about this. House Republicans released a sweeping plan late on Sunday to curb who gets Medicare coverage and roll back President Joe Biden's electric vehicle mandate, among other measures. The Energy and Commerce Committee, which has broad jurisdiction, including over federal health programs, telecommunication, and energy, was tasked with finding at least $880 billion in spending cuts to pay for other priorities in President Donald Trump's big, beautiful bill. Committee Chairman Brett Guthrie told House Republicans on the lawmaker-only call on Sunday night that the panel had found north of $900 billion in savings. However, a significant victory for House GOP leaders who withered attacks from Democrats about significant cuts to welfare programs like Medicaid. However, Republicans likely avoided the deep cuts to Medicaid that were sought by some fiscal hawks in the House GOP conference, a win for moderate Republicans who were more politically vulnerable to Democratic attacks over the issues. The legislation would put an 80-hour per week requirement on certain able-bodied adults receiving Medicare aged 19 through 64. It would also put guardrails on states' spending funds on their expanded Medicare populations. The Affordable Care Act allowed states to expand Medicare coverage to adults who make up to 138% of the poverty level. More specifically, states that provided Medicare coverage to illegal immigrants could see their federal Medicare reimbursement dollars diminished, putting more of that cost on the state itself. The bill would also require states to expand Medicare populations to perform eligibility checks every 6 months to ensure the system is not being abused. That's fantastic. All right. Now, I know the article said that it did not have the spending cuts that a lot of really fiscal conservatives want to see, but $900 billion is still a lot. So I have a chart here. So this is from fiscaldata.treasury.gov. Link is in the description if you want to go see it for yourself. But this shows U.S. government spending for 2025. So FYTD 2025, top 10 spending categories per the agency. So fiscal year to date of 2025. So we can see how spending has been evaluated. So Medicare, $550 billion. Health, $555 billion. And then Social Security, $907 billion, right? So cutting $900 billion from this, that's like taking out one of these whole agencies right now. So I think this is great. This is a big deal. I mean, our national debt is our spending so far is $4 trillion. So how much has, you can see the live ticker, how much has the U.S. government spent this year? $4 trillion, right? That's like taking out a fourth of what we spent so far this year. That's that's a lot of money, right? Is as much as I wish it could have been? No, absolutely not. It should be way more than that. But does it make an impact? Yeah. It's a good starting point. Absolutely. Right. This is better than nothing. This is better than increasing spending. At least we're lowering it. At least we're finding ways to cut it or reallocate money to other things and cut spending. Right. This is a big deal. I'm glad to see this is happening. And hopefully this all goes through the way that it should. And all those spending cuts do, in fact, take place because we need it. We need massive spending cuts in this country. We have way too much debt. All right. So our last story of the week, another Trump story. This comes from the Daily Wire. Trump teases most consequential executive order in our country's history. President Donald Trump said Sunday he will sign an executive order that will reduce the cost of pharmaceuticals, quote, almost immediately by 30 to 80%. Trump announced the move in a post on Truth Social. The order aims to bring fairness to America by lowering drug costs in the United States while raising them throughout the rest of the world. Quote, therefore, I am pleased to announce that tomorrow morning in the White House at 9 a.m., I will be signing one of the most consequential executive orders in our country's history, Trump said. I will be instituting a most favored national policy whereby the United States will pay the same price as the nation that pays the lowest price anywhere in the world, he said. Our country will finally be treated fairly and our citizens' health costs will be reduced by numbers never even thought of before. Additionally, on top of everything else, the United States will save trillions of dollars. Quote, we're going to tariff our pharmaceuticals, Trump told the National Republican Congressional Committee. Quote, and once we do that, they're going to come rushing back to our country because we're the big market. In the United States, drugs are significantly more costly than elsewhere in the world. On average, prices in the United States are 2.78 times higher than those seen in 33 other nations, according to a 2024 Rand Corporation report. For brand name drugs, the price differs even starker. The gap between prices in the United States and other countries is even larger for brand name drugs, while with U.S. prices averaging 4.22 times those in comparing nations. Some of the contributing factors to high drug costs in the United States are the lack of transparency in drug prices and the prevalence of foreign countries of having centralized government negotiators haggling over the cost of pharmaceuticals. So this is fantastic, right? I love that the Trump administration is really taking an all-around approach to the healthcare situation in the United States. So we're cutting a lot of money from, Medicare? From Medicaid. We're cutting a lot of money from Medicaid. We're lowering pharmaceutical prices, and we're bringing in people like RFK Jr., like Casey Means, like all these other doctors that are being brought in to run these agencies that are looking at American health more holistically, right? So we have people in the NIH, within Health and Human Services. We have a new Surgeon General. All of these people are looking at trying to make healthcare better in the United States by reducing chronic disease, by getting us to eat better, by getting us to be more healthy, by trying to make our food supply of a higher quality, right? All of these things come together to make our population more healthy. On the other hand, you're always going to have diseases that are going to require pharmaceutical drugs to treat them. And by lowering those costs, it helps even more Americans, right? The idea being, let's reduce the amount of people who have chronic diseases being caused by sickness because of the food that they're eating or the lack of activity or any other means that can be self-treated without a drug, right? We'll reduce those numbers. And then the amount of people that still have to take pharmaceutical drugs will be much better off because their drugs are going to be lower and they'll pay less money for it. So this is great. I'm glad to see that prices are being reduced. Glad to see that we're bringing hostages back. Glad to see that we are cutting spending. This is all great news from the Trump administration and from the Republican government. Cannot forget about these wins as we're going into 2026. But with that, this is the end of our episode for today. Thank you so much for watching with us, for staying with us. If you missed the episode, if you showed up towards the end, we will be rerunning this episode tomorrow night, 8 p.m. If you missed it, you want to rewatch it. If you want to rewatch it right now, you can go onto YouTube or Rumble and see it. It will be uploaded there very shortly. And we'll be back here with a brand new episode on Wednesday. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe to all of our channels. We're on Rumble, YouTube, X, Instagram. I'm also on TikTok. So with that, make sure you're there. Share this with your friends. Let people know how great the show is. Let people know how great I am. I always appreciate the compliments. Follow me on X if you're not doing so already. Let me know I'm doing there. Always posting on that platform. But with that, I have been Nathan Hale. This has been Spinsicle Live. We will see you back here Wednesday night. Peace out.